Vanshika's fingers tightened around the leather steering wheel of her sleek, charcoal grey SUV. The afternoon heat of Mumbai was oppressive, but inside the climate-controlled cabin, the air was crisp and scented with expensive jasmine perfume. Beside her, Harish was scrolling through his tablet, murmuring something about the quarterly profit margins of his Hill Road mobile franchise. He looked every bit the successful, contented husband, handsome, doting, and utterly secure in the pristine life they had built together. To Harish, Vanshika was the ideal wife, sophisticated, soft-spoken, and untouched by the grime of the world. He often boasted to his business associates that he had married a woman of pure virtue, a blank slate whose life truly began the day they wed. Vanshika always smiled gracefully at those compliments, but inside, her chest felt like a hollow cavern lined with broken glass. The traffic crawled forward and then shuddered to a halt at a major intersection. The light turned a stubborn, solid red. Almost instantly, the car was surrounded. The intersection was a chaotic theater of survival, populated by the city's forgotten souls. Emaciated hands tapped against the tinted windows. Vendors selling cheap plastic toys, artificial jasmine garlands, and colorful dusters weaved between the idling bumpers. Harish didn't even look up from his screen. He was entirely immune to the sight. But Vanshika's eyes were magnetically drawn to the curb. A boy was darting through the maze of exhaust pipes. He was small, perhaps 10 or 11, with sun-bleached hair and skin darkened by years of exposure to the relentless elements. Yet, despite his oversized, tattered t-shirt and bare feet, his eyes possessed an electric, defiant brilliance. Today, he was clutching a bundle of bright, helium-filled balloons that bobbed merrily above the sea of metal. He stopped right outside Vanshika's window, tapping a coin against the glass. He flashed a brilliant, gap-toothed smile that instantly pierced through Vanshika's carefully constructed memory. Without thinking, Vanshika rolled down the window. A wave of hot, humid air, thick with petrol fumes, rushed into the air-conditioned sanctuary. "Arnie, please take a balloon," the boy said, his voice a melodic, high-pitched chirp. "Look at the red one, it flies the highest. Buy it for your children. They will be so happy." Vanshika felt a sudden, sharp ache in the deepest recesses of her heart. She forced a polite, fragile smile. "What will I do with a balloon, Peter? I don't have any children." The boy tilted his head, his dark eyes studying her face with an unnerving, innate curiosity. He didn't look disappointed. Instead, his smile softened into something deeply empathetic, a gaze far too mature for a street urchin. "Then buy it for yourself, Arnie. Grown-ups need to smile too. Please. It's afternoon and I haven't sold a single one yet. My grandmother is waiting." There was a strange, haunting cadence to his voice, an echo of the melody Vanshika thought she had buried deep in a past life. Her hand trembled as she reached into her designer purse, pulled out a 500 rupee note far exceeding the price of the plastic toys and pressed it into his small, rough palm. "Keep the change," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion she couldn't identify. The boy's face illuminated with pure, unadulterated joy. "Thank you, Arnie. My name is Arian. I'll save the best storybook for you next time." Before she could respond, the traffic light flashed green. The cars behind them began a deafening symphony of horns. Harish finally glanced up, frowning slightly at the open window. "Vanshika, close the glass, the pollution is terrible today. And don't encourage these street kids, they make a habit of targeting the same cars." Vanshika rolled up the window in silence. As the SUV surged forward, she watched Arian in the side mirror, his small frame growing smaller and smaller until he was swallowed by the shimmering heat haze of the highway. Over the next few months, the red signal became the center of Vanshika's universe. Every single day, as they drove to the office, her heart would race as they approached that specific intersection. If the light was green, a profound wave of depression would wash over her. But if the light turned red, she felt an ecstatic rush of anticipation. Arian was always there. Sometimes he sold balloons, sometimes he carried a stack of cheap pirated novels, and sometimes he held vibrant marigold flowers. "Arnie, balloons pop too easily, and the profit is low," Arian explained one afternoon, leaning confidently against the door of the luxury car. He held up a thin, poorly printed children's book. "Books are better. They last forever. This one is only 20 rupees. You should read it." Vanshika didn't need a children's book, but she bought it instantly. She accumulated a secret drawer full of cheap toys, keychains, and paperbacks in her pristine, modern apartment treasures bought from a child who was becoming the only anchor to her hidden soul. She began carrying small snacks, juice boxes, and clean shirts in her bag, handing them to him under the guise of casual charity. Harish noticed her sudden fixation but dismissed it as a misplaced maternal instinct of a woman who hadn't yet conceived. "If you want a child so badly, Vanshika, we should see a specialist," he said gently over dinner one night. "You don't need to pour your affection into those street beggars. They are born in the gutter, and they stay in the gutter." Vanshika felt a chill run down her spine, but she merely nodded, keeping her secrets locked tight. Harish did not know about the nightmares that plagued her sleep. He did not know about the ghost that haunted her every waking hour, a ghost named Aryan. One Tuesday morning, the sky over Mumbai was heavy with dark, ominous monsoon clouds. The traffic at the intersection was worse than usual, a stagnant river of iron and steel. Vanshika looked out the window, her eyes scanning the crowd of vendors, but the familiar, energetic figure of the balloon boy was nowhere to be seen. Instead, near the concrete divider, a small crowd of street children had gathered, their faces unusually solemn, talking in hushed, panicked whispers. On the asphalt, scattered like broken autumn leaves, were several cheap, brightly colored children's books, their pages stained with mud in a dark, terrifying crimson fluid. Vanshika's breath caught in her throat. A cold, suffocating dread gripped her heart, tighter than any panic she had ever known. She lowered the window completely, ignoring the humid wind. She called out to a young girl who was holding a basket of pens. "Hey, Beta. Come here. Where is the boy who sells books? The one with the balloons?" The girl ran over, her eyes wide and wet with tears. "Arnie. You are the lady from the big car, right? Erin always talked about you. He's gone." A big black car broke the signal and hit him. He flew into the air and hit the concrete. There was so much blood, Arnie. The car didn't even stop. Some people put him in a three-wheeler and took him to the municipal hospital, but everyone is saying his head was broken open. They say he won't survive the day. The world inside the SUV instantly shattered. The sound of the traffic, Harish's voice, the hum of the engine, all of it faded into a high-pitched, deafening ringing in her ears. Vanshika felt her chest heaving, the air refusing to enter her lungs. "Vanshika? What's wrong? Why are you crying over a street kid?" Harish's voice finally broke through, tinged with confusion and irritation. "Harish, let me out," she gasped, her hands fumbling frantically with the door lock. "I have to go. I have to go to the hospital." "Are you insane?" Harish grabbed her arm, his grip firm. "Look at the traffic. We have a meeting with the distributors in 20 minutes. You cannot get out of the car in the middle of the highway for a beggar boy. Let the authorities handle it. Let me go." Vanshika screamed, a raw, primal sound that shocked Harish so deeply his grip loosened. She pushed the heavy door open, stepping directly into the chaotic stream of traffic. Horns blared angrily around her, but she didn't care. She ran to the edge of the road, grabbed the young girl by her shoulders, her voice trembling. "Where does he live? Do you know his home? His grandmother?" "Yes, Arnie. In the slums behind the railway tracks." "I can take you," the girl cried. Vanshika turned back to the car. Harish was leaning out of the window, his face a mask of absolute bewilderment and rage. "Vanshika. If you walk away right now, don't bother coming to the office. This is madness. Go, Harish. Just go," she sobbed. She hailed a passing auto rickshaw, pulling the young street girl inside. As the vehicle rattled violently through the narrow, waterlogged alleys of the Mumbai slums, Vanshika's mind was a storm of agony. She didn't understand why this specific child's pain felt like an executioner's axe hovering over her own neck. They stopped at the edge of a dense shanty town, a labyrinth of blue tarpaulin roofs and open sewers. The rain began to fall in heavy, punishing sheets. The girl led Vanshika down a slippery, narrow corridor between tin shacks, stopping outside a dilapidated room where a small group of neighbored women had already gathered, their faces grim. From inside the shack, a sound emerged that made Vanshika's blood run cold, the agonizing, frail wailing of an elderly woman grieving for her flesh and blood. Vanshika pushed past the women at the doorway, her expensive area dragging through the mud. She stepped into the dim, damp room. Sitting on a woven cot, clutching a small, faded shirt to her chest, was an old woman with silver hair and a face etched with a lifetime of sorrow. Vanshika stopped dead in her tracks. The breath was completely knocked from her body. The old woman looked up, her tear-filled, clouded eyes locking onto Vanshika's pale face. The old woman's sobbing ceased instantly, replaced by a gasp of pure shock. Her fragile frame began to shake violently. "Vanshika," the old woman whispered, her voice cracking. You are here. After all these years?" Vanshika collapsed to her knees on the damp dirt floor, her knees buckling under the weight of an impossible, horrifying realization. The old woman was Sumitra, the mother of Edgar, her first husband. Emma. Vanshika choked out, her hands covering her mouth as the universe collapsed around her. Emma, why are you here? Where is Arian? Sumitra fell from the cot, crawling toward Vanshika, grabbing her hands with a desperate, crushing grip. I couldn't save him, Vanshika. I brought him to this city to give him a better life, but the city took him. The boy from the red signal, the boy you bought books from, that was your son. That was our Arian. A scream of pure, unadulterated torment tore from Vanshika's throat, a sound so devastating it silenced the entire slum. 10 years ago, Vanshika was a rebellious 19-year-old who had eloped with Edgar, a charismatic but dangerous man, defying her wealthy, aristocratic family. They had a beautiful baby boy, whom they named Arian. But within a year, Edgar's criminal life caught up with him, and he was brutally assassinated by a rival gang. Creft and penniless, Vanshika was forced back to her parents. They offered her a choice: return to society and accept a prestigious second marriage, or starve on the streets with a criminal's child. Her parents, along with Edgar's grieving parents, convinced her that the child would have no future as a social outcast. With a heart broken into a million pieces, Vanshika had handed her 1-year-old infant to Sumitra and walked away into a new, sterilized life of wealth and lies. She had been told years later that Sumitra had moved away to a distant village. She had never imagined, not in her wildest nightmares, that poverty had driven the old woman to the slums of Mumbai. She had never imagined that the polite, beautiful little boy who had been selling her balloons at the red signal, the boy she treated with casual charity, was the very child she had carried in her womb for 9 months. I'm a cursed mother. Vanshika shrieked, tearing at her hair, her tears mixing with the rain dripping through the leaky roof. My own blood was begging at my car window. He was asking me for 20 rupees, and I was sitting on millions. Emma, take me to him. Take me to my child. One of the neighbored women stepped forward, wiping her eyes. He is at the King Edward Memorial Hospital, sister. The doctors said he is in the intensive care unit. There is no time to waste. Vanshika didn't look back. She ran out into the pouring rain, her heart beating with a ferocious, desperate rhythm. She had abandoned him once to save herself, but she would die before she let him slip away into the dark again. The white corridor of the public hospital smelled heavily of bleach and despair. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a sickly greenish glow over the crowded waiting room. Vanshika sat on a cold steel bench, her clothes soaked, her hair plastered to her face, staring blankly at the double doors of the ICU. Inside, behind a wall of glass and a web of plastic tubes, Arian was fighting for his life. The doctors are being brutally honest: a severe traumatic brain injury, massive internal bleeding. If he did not regain consciousness within 72 hours, his brain would cease to function entirely. Sumitra sat beside her, her frail head resting against Vanshika's shoulder, holding a plastic rosary, her lips moving in silent, desperate prayer. Every few minutes, Vanshika's phone would vibrate in her wet purse. It was Harish. After the 20th call, she finally answered, her voice dead and hollow. Vanshika. Where the hell are you? Harish's voice exploded through the speaker, tight with humiliation and anger. The distributors left. My family is asking questions. Why did you abandon me on the highway for a beggar child? Have you lost your mind? Come home right now. Vanshika looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the hospital window. The elegant, submissive wife Harish knew was gone. In her place stood a desperate lioness defending her cub. I cannot come home, Harish, she said, her voice terrifyingly calm. The boy who was hit, he is not a stranger. He is my son. There was a long, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. What joke is this? We don't have a son. I had a life before you, Harish. A life my parents buried under a mountain of money and lies, Vanshika said, a single tear cutting through the grime on her cheek. I was married. My husband was killed, and I had a child. The boy at the red signal is my flesh and blood. I abandoned him 10 years ago to become the perfect woman for your world. But I am done lying. I'm staying here. You lied to me. Harish's voice cracked, not with sorrow, but with absolute betrayal and disgust. My parents, my reputation, you are a widow with a street beggar's child. If you stay there, Vanshika, if you choose the gutter over our home, do not ever think of coming back. Our marriage is dead. Then let it be dead, Vanshika whispered, and switched off the phone. For 3 days, the hospital bench became Vanshika's world. She refused to eat, refused to sleep, and refused to leave the ICU doors. She poured her wealth into the hospital's pharmacy, buying every expensive injection, every rare medicine the doctors prescribed, utilizing the very money she had once prioritized over her own child. She sat by the glass window, watching the rhythmic rise and fall of Arian's small chest, pouring every ounce of her soul into his failing body through her gaze. On the third evening, as the sun set over the chaotic city, a senior doctor emerged from the ICU, removing his surgical mask. His tired face broke into a gentle, miraculous smile. "The swelling in the brain has subsided," the doctor said. "The internal bleeding has stopped. He has just opened his eyes. You can go in, but please, keep him calm." Vanshika felt a surge of energy course through her veins. She and Sumitra rushed into the sterile room. Arian lay on the large white bed, looking incredibly small amidst the heavy medical machinery. His head was completely bandaged, but his dark eyes, those brilliant, electric eyes, were open. He turned his head slowly as the door clicked shut. When he saw Vanshika, a faint, weak shadow of his gap-toothed smile appeared on his pale face. "Honey," he whispered, his voice barely audible beneath the oxygen mask. "You came, did you? Did you read the book?" Vanshika collapsed beside his bed, gently taking his small, bruised hand and pressing it against her wet cheek. She kissed his fingers over and over again, her tears washing over his skin. "I am not your Rani, my beautiful, brave boy," she sobbed, her voice ringing with a profound, liberating truth. "I am your mother. I am your mama. And I am never, ever going to leave you again." Arian stared at her, his young mind processing the words, looking from her to his weeping grandmother who stood at the foot of the bed, nodding through her tears. A profound look of peace settled over the boy's face. He didn't ask questions. He didn't harbor anger. In the simple, resilient heart of a child who had survived the streets, the warmth of a mother's touch was an instant, absolute truth. He squeezed her hand back, a tiny, fragile grip that felt stronger than the world. A week later, Arian was discharged from the hospital. Vanshika entered a clean, sunlit two-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood away from the slums. She moved Sumitra and Arian in, spending every waking hour cooking for them, reading to them, and nursing her son back to health. She had left her luxury SUV, her designer clothes, and her wealthy husband behind, but for the first time in 10 years, when she looked in the mirror, she saw a woman who was truly whole. One evening, 10 days after leaving the hospital, there was a firm knock on the apartment door. Vanshika opened it, expecting a delivery driver. Instead, she froze. Standing in the narrow corridor was Harish. Behind him stood his elderly mother, a traditional woman who had always been strict about family honor. Vanshika stepped back, her defensive instincts instantly flaring. "Harish, what are you doing here? If you're here to insult me or my family, please leave." Harish looked exhausted. The anger in his eyes vanished, replaced by a deep, humbled sorrow. He didn't speak. Instead, his mother stepped forward. The elderly woman looked at Vanshika, her eyes softening as she saw the simple cotton sari Vanshika was wearing, her hands rough from housework. Without a word, Harish's mother reached out and pulled Vanshika into a warm, maternal embrace. "Foolish girl," the old woman murmured, wiping a tear from Vanshika's eye. "Did you really think we are so heartless? Harish told me everything." He was angry because he was hurt by the lie, but a mother's heart understands a mother's pain. "You sacrificed your child for a life you thought you wanted, and you nearly lost your soul. How could we call ourselves a righteous family if we left you to suffer alone?" Harish stepped into the room, his eyes scanning the modest apartment until they landed on Arian, who was sitting on the sofa, a book in his hand, watching the scene with curious eyes. Harish walked over to the boy, kneeling down so he was at eye level with him. He looked at Vanshika, his expression filled with a quiet, profound remorse. "I was wrong, Vanshika. I said children from the gutter stay in the gutter. But looking at him, looking at how brave he is, I see he has the blood of a queen. I cannot live in that big, empty house without you. And our home is big enough for all of us." He turned back to Arian, offering his hand. "Hello, Arian. I'm Harish. Will you come live with us? We have a very big yard, and I think we need someone to fill it with balloons." Arian looked at his mother. Vanshika nodded, her heart overflowing with a beautiful, unexpected joy. Arian smiled his bright, gap-toothed smile and shook Harish's hand. "Only if we can buy the red ones. They fly the highest." As the family prepared to move back to the Hill Road house, Vanshika felt a strange, sudden wave of nausea. She sat down on the bed, her hand instinctively coming to rest on her stomach. Sumitra, observing her with the ancient wisdom of a grandmother, smiled gently. 2 days later, a doctor confirmed the news. Vanshika was 2 months pregnant. The universe, which had once stripped her of everything, was now pouring its blessings upon her in abundance. A few months later, Vanshika gave birth to a beautiful, healthy baby boy, and 2 years after that, a laughter-filled little girl completed their circle. The grand house in Mumbai was no longer a sterile fortress of secrets and lies. It was a chaotic, beautiful home filled with the sounds of children playing. Aryan, now an intelligent, thriving teenager attending one of the best schools in the city, excelled in his studies, his resilient spirit guiding his younger siblings with protective devotion. Every now and then, when Harish and Vanshika would drive through the bustling streets of Mumbai and stop at a crowded intersection, Vanshika would look out at the children weaving through the traffic. She no longer looked away in shame or guilt. Instead, she would roll down her window, hand out fresh fruits and notebooks, and look at her husband, whose hand was firmly holding hers. They had learned the greatest truth the city could teach them, that love is not found in the pristine segregation of wealth, but in the willingness to reach into the storm, pull a forgotten soul into your arms, and build a bridge of forgiveness that spans across a lifetime of regret.